Yep. And I'm happy to kick off what is Gugum 2023. I think our perhaps third online version of this, maybe fourth. So I think we've got this hopefully down to mostly a science. But I'm happy to welcome a panel of open source advocates and experts and folks who want to spend some time talking about that topic with you this morning. And I'm going to do some brief introductions and then let them take it away. So we have three folks on the call this morning. We have Peter Murray, who's an open source community advocate at Index Data, which is a software development and consulting enterprise and has expertise in networked information retrieval and management-based open standards. He had his MLIS from Simmons College and a Bachelor of Science degree in systems analysis from Miami University. His current activities include building relationships among libraries, organizations, and service providers participating in the Folio Library Services platform and the resource sharing projects. We're also joined by Chris Sharp, who is part of the Georgia Public Library Service as Pines system admin. He joined them in 2008 and has been the Pines technical lead since then. Joining the Pines staff just after the launch of Evergreen in 2006, Chris has been a leader in the Evergreen ILS software community, serving on governance boards, conference planning committees, and as a core committer to the open source software project. Before working at GPLS, Chris worked at DeKalb County Public Library as a parapro and a reference library after earning his MLIS from Florida State. And then also we have Emily Gore on the call. She is the Associate University Librarian at UGA Libraries. Here she leads digital collections, data management, scholarly communication, and other initiatives to enhance the research, instruction, and service missions of the library. She previously served as Assistant Dean for Digital Initiatives and Technology Infrastructure at University of Tennessee's Library, as well as Director of Content at the Digital Public Library of America and Associate Dean of Libraries for Digital Scholarship and Technology at Florida State University, and head of Digital Initiatives and Info Technology at Clemson. She earned her master's in library science from the University of Alabama. So welcome, Chris, Peter, and Emily. We appreciate you all taking the time to talk with us. We're very obviously interested in this topic, and we're excited to hear what you all have to say. So I guess to sort of kick it off, and I'll let y'all tell us a little bit about your experience working with open library services. And maybe since I've got y'all in video order, Peter, if you wanted to take it away, and we'll start with you for this question and go from there.
Sure. Okay. So in my experience, open is just built into the ethos of libraries. I mean, even if we look at just the last century, we have the Library of Congress starting the National Union Catalog Project in 1901. That was about sharing the contents of the cards in the catalog, and ALA establishing a code of practice for interlibrary loan in 1917. So that notion of sharing in libraries goes back a long way. My career in libraries has always been about the open. I started in 1991 at the same time OhioLink was forming, and I remember many trips to Columbus, Ohio, to work out the processes and to share tips and tricks with each other as OhioLink was coming together. I was even giving away code and adapting code from others before the phrase open source came into common use. And over the course of my career, I've worked on several open source projects, Fedora, Islandora, Archive Space, Collection Space, Folio, and Reshare, just to name a few. I also think standards are also an important part of what open is. In order to ease the process of us working together and our systems working together, it helps to have that common starting point to build on. And I've been working on NISO projects and committees for most of my career, and it kind of warms my professional heart to see better services come about for patrons because there's agreement on how the pieces should be put together.
All right, great, thanks. Emily?
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of what Peter said. I could not agree. I feel like I've been a librarian for, I think this is my 23rd year now, and I feel like open is at the core of what we do in libraries. And I mean, we're about supporting scholarship, lifelong learning, sharing broadly, building community around. I mean, this is an example right here, this meeting of kind of building community, sharing our thoughts, and that it's really kind of built in the heart of what we do. So similar to Peter, most of my experience with open source software, a lot of it comes from the digital library space because that's where most of my early career has focused, including platforms, DSpace, Islandora, Samvera, Fedora, and Blacklight, tools like that. I've also been heavily involved in the IIIF community, which is the International Image Interoperability framework. So it has a set of open APIs, and it's a tool for image and audio video viewing. I think, open source software is just one piece of that larger ecosystem. I think there's lots of other pieces on that open spectrum, and I think software, got there maybe even a little later, than all of these things. I mean, Peter was talking about, a turn of the century services that really kind of have that spirit of open in libraries, have embodied that spirit for a really long time, longer than any of us have been around. So right now, I would say a main part of my job is about access to open research, and including publications and research data. I'm sure many of you know about the recent OSTP memo and the various updates before that. So that's the Office of Science and Technology Policy, where if you receive federal funding, you need to, there are mandates coming into place where you need to make data and publications available that have been funded with federal dollars. And so at an institution that really at its foundation is the research enterprise, like the University of Georgia and many other institutions here on the call, we have lots of federal dollars coming in, lots of research being produced. So really thinking about infrastructure to support that broad sharing. And then the last point I was going to make is about standards development, similar to Peter. One of the standards I have worked hard, it's more of a de facto standard instead of through the NISO, ISO, which has its own place, don't get me wrong, but a de facto standard often it comes from the community up, and really often never goes through the official ISO standards, but is rightstatements.org, which some of you may be familiar with. But when I was at the Digital Public Library of America, I helped work with Europeana to kind of set the framework of rightstatements.org, which helps describe kind of that those digital collections that we share, and so that people can know what they can and cannot do with something that they do find online based on copyright. So I feel like all of that is a key part of the kind of open ecosystem career.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. Chris, some of your background and experience working with open library services.
Thank you. Yeah, when I started in as you mentioned in the intro, I started at Pines in 2008, and that was right after Evergreen had been, introduced to the world. And before Evergreen, in that same sense of, openness preceded open source software. I mean, that's that Pines, the mission of Pines was to open up the collection of all the state libraries into one catalog so that it would be shared across the state. So no matter whether you lived in a community that was maybe not as well resourced as some of the larger library communities, you could still have access to a broad array of resources. But yeah, when I started investigating open source software, I was in library school and was, learning about this in my classes. And then I started using Mozilla products. I started using Firefox and Thunderbird and got really excited about this and was installing it on everything I could. And eventually got into Linux and installed that on anything I could. When GPLS had a job opening for the Pine System Administrator, I jumped at that opportunity and because I was excited about what GPLS was doing. And in that sense of openness, sharing, I guess you could compare what I went through during that period as like a religious conversion. I was really, talking my relatives' ears off about, the benefits of open source software. And, I continue to use open source software in my personal life and kind of everywhere I can. So I'm definitely an advocate for that.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, I'd be curious, Chris, since I've got you, and you've, I guess, 15 years now and sort of the nuts and bolts of it a little bit. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest advantages and risks in working in that open source environment?
Yeah. Well, on the advantage side, open source software is typically free to use. There's typically not any sort of charge to scale up or scale down as far as you can do for, a lot of proprietary products charge for each seat or each workstation and that kind of stuff. That pricing model is not really relevant typically in an open source software environment. So that adds to some affordability and, some of the headaches that come with deciding who gets what license, that kind of thing. Probably the most important advantage overall is that the licensing of open source software allows end users and those with skills to see and possibly alter the actual source code that lets you customize this for your own use. In a consortial setting like Pines, that's typically going to be done at a large level where we're funding a redo of the acquisitions interfaces or things like that. But the fact that it's open for people to tinker or to actually do major improvements to, that's a huge advantage. On the scalability point, you can install Evergreen or Koha or Folio on commodity hardware and scale it up as large as you want to. It can scale up or down. There are single library systems using Evergreen, and there are large consortia like Pines using Evergreen. The other big advantage I'd say is the existence of a software development community that is typically outside. I think a lot of us in this sort of situation have our day jobs where we're supporting our own instance of Evergreen or Koha or whatever, and then we have our time that we're developing for the larger community, participating in those discussions, trying to help people get their feet wet in the open source world and that kind of thing. On the downsides, I'd say that, I think this has been said too much. It got oversaid about 10 years ago, 15 years ago about free as in beer, as opposed to free as in kittens. that was said a lot. There was during that period of 2008, 2009, 2010, after the big splash that Evergreen made, there was a lot of people sort of just getting excited about that idea. It was like, oh, we can save all this money and just use open source software, and then, you know, everything will be great, and we'll, you know, have the same thing with no cost. And that is a mistake. That's not really how it works. The cost comes somewhere. The cost comes with hiring more people, or the cost comes with paying someone to host. You know, so the financial cost can be the same, and depending on how involved you are in development, sometimes more than you would be paying for a vendor, you know, like a proprietary product. The development itself can get expensive, as I just mentioned. You know, it's and really we've hit a point in Evergreen development where there are not quite enough developers to meet the needs of everybody moving forward. So some of the larger projects, you know, at the acquisitions interface redo is one, end up taking a long time because, you know, we just have a limited number of hands, which on the upside, because I'm a person that looks at both, means that you can also recruit new developers and get them involved. And, you know, just in general with open source software, I don't think this is a problem with Evergreen or Koha or these established communities, but there's always the risk of a project just sort of being abandoned. You know, that a lot of these come from individual developers scratching their itch, and maybe they get bored of that someday and they decide they want to do something else. And so at that point, the fact that the code is, you know, licensed to be open and shareable is, pardon me? Sorry. Oh, okay. The fact that the software is licensed to be shareable and open and, you know, able to be developed becomes less important than just having a piece of software you can actually use in a secure way. And sometimes that even happens with dependencies underneath Evergreen or Koha or any other open source product. If you're from, there's the node.js, you know, npm community, there are all kinds of things. Like anything you install installs like 1,000 dependencies, and one of those maybe gets dropped or deprecated, and then all of a sudden you're in trouble. You have to go digging around for other things. So those are other risks as well. And then on the same note, changes that the upstream projects make. So, you know, Linux makes a change, or PostgreSQL makes a change, or MySQL makes a change that ends up breaking your software. So then you have to run around fixing code that you feel like you've already written. So bug fixes are an issue too. Now, all of this is also true of proprietary software. There's no big bright line between those two things. But the nature of open source projects makes it maybe a little more vulnerable to that sort of change, getting people kind of caught flat-footed as they move forward.
Yeah, thank you. Emily or Peter, did you have any comments on sort of advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, I wanted to build a little bit on what Chris was saying. I think some of the advantages is having a seat at the table as decisions are made. The software or the system isn't just given to you and you can ask for things to be done to it. With open source, you can participate in the creation, you know, bringing the best of your experience and the needs of your patrons to bear as these products and services and software are designed. It's so much easier to have that input at the front end rather than trying to retrofit a system to meet your needs after the fact. And with so many voices and perspectives in the creation process, it also reduces the risk that something important will be missed. But that said, you're getting a lot of people involved. And so the biggest risk, I think, is time and patience. Having so many people involved in the design process means that it takes time to listen to all those perspectives, and it takes effort to synthesize the way forward for the group. There will be misunderstandings and there will be compromise. And there may even be paths that you want to pursue, but the group isn't willing to follow. And of course, there's the risk that the path that the group does follow may not be fruitful. So, open source, the ability to participate in the design and the creation is both an advantage and a risk. It's an advantage to have your perspective there early in the process as something is being created, and it's also a risk that what's being done may not make it to fruition, or it may end up, as Chris said, being abandoned after a time, and then you need to start again. So yeah, that kind of double-edged sword.
Well, one more point on that. I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean to talk over you. One more point on that is what's called forking is possible with open source software. So you can, if there is a project that gets abandoned or takes a direction you don't like, or this happens all the time in open source projects. Probably the most highly visible example would be OpenOffice became bought. OpenOffice was purchased by a vendor, and the community was afraid that the vendor was going to do all this stuff to it and kind of close it up. So they forked it and called it LibreOffice, which is now the default word processing and everything on Linux distributions typically. So the importance of that is that it gives you an opportunity to take things in the direction that you think they need to go. And as Peter said, that comes with risks as well. So I'm sorry, Emily, go ahead.
No, you really hit on where I was going. I was going to talk about kind of the just because you can alter the code doesn't mean you necessarily should, and you have to. I think you have to really assess the risk in doing so. I think I've definitely experienced a lot of, we're a special snowflake and we need to create this software that does this thing. And I think there's a lot of potential danger in that. Especially if you're moving away from where the larger community is going. So when releases come out, upgrades of the software come out, and you've gone down a path where you've specialized the code, it's just, you just have to realize the maintenance involved. I mean, like you said, it's not any different than I think any other software that is supported. But I think that how much we customize and how much we move away from the community core code can be a pitfall. So it's just something we need to be, I think, cognizant about in the decision making, because there's a lot of maintenance involved.
All right, thank y'all. So, given where you've been, and maybe I'll just start off with Emily on this one, since you were last talking. And what do you see on the horizon? What are you excited about that's coming down the line? That's in sort of another initiative out there that's open, and that's interested you or piqued your interest. This is for everybody, but let's start with Emily.
Sure, happy to. So I'll just build on a little bit more. I think it's a little bit more where my head is now, and that is around kind of open scholarship and the support of open scholarship. So making publications widely available, not kind of getting rid of that paywall, shifting. We've been shifting as a library, ecosystem. I feel like in particular in academic libraries towards open access publications and a model of making scholarship more broadly available for at least 10 years. I would say it's been, kind of on an active roadmap for most academic institutions. I feel like that's definitely accelerating. I feel like the government has helped push the gas on that a little bit for everyone with these recent mandates. I feel like that's personally, I'm grateful for those things. I do often worry about the infrastructure to share that, the funding required, like how we're going to support sharing all of this scholarship. But I do feel like the concept of really getting our the scholarship produced at our university, the scholarship produced with federal dollars, sharing that broadly around the world, it just creates a better global society, getting information out to everyone without having to kind of log in and get that and be credentialed. I know when I worked at the Digital Public Library of America, it was one of those super shocks to my system not to be associated with an academic institution anymore. I couldn't just go and pull up whatever research I wanted. So I think it's it's one of those things that I really am glad to be paying a small part in and kind of pushing that needle and helping share UGA scholarship and getting it out. So that's one of the things I think I'm most excited about. I'm also super excited that UGA is going and the whole USG system is going to go to Folio. I feel like an open source library management system. Lord, we've been on that horizon for a long time. I mean, it's had many iterations, but I think the fact that we've finally got a product that is not vaporware, that works, that has support behind it, that has big industry players kind of coming to the table and helping support it, I think is an exciting future. And I feel like we're going to see just more and more of that. I feel like we're going to see more open source being supported by vendors and kind of hopefully moving away from some of that licensing model where we're kind of, paying chair by chair. And I feel that really aligns with where scholarship is going, with where sharing scholarship. I know many folks on this call probably negotiate licenses with vendors, and so they're like, probably not so much. We're still giving, X vendor millions of dollars. Agreed, but I definitely see the models really changing and the demand for open access publishing. In particular, UGA, my phone rings almost every day. Somebody wanting APCs covered in order to make their scholarship open. So there's a lot of demand, and I feel like that's a really changing ecosystem, and it's an exciting time to be in libraries.
Peter or Chris, anything that you see on the horizon that you're excited about or curious about or scared of?
I'll briefly, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to briefly echo what Emily said. The main thing I'm excited about right now is that Gil is going with an open source product. I don't think I'm speaking out of school to say that Evergreen was considered in their investigations, and we were very happy to see that, and we participated in that as far as GPLS and Pine staff were involved in that process, and it's just really exciting to see, something that I think, when I started at GPLS in 2008 wasn't really, there was a lot of skepticism about it even working at all at that point. And so, I'm glad to see this happening. I'm glad to see Folio, becoming, as Emily said, not vaporware, and becoming a real project. And that's awesome, because I know that was a long time coming as well. So it's great.
Yeah, I too wanted to echo what Emily was saying about the open access movement. I just find this fascinating. There's the phrase that progress happens one retirement at a time. I used to chuckle at that, but after 30 years in the profession, that phrase is less funny and more stinging. But the slow and steady progress really seems to be real. And Emily mentioned that the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy for the federal government departments. Just earlier this month, there was an announcement out of the EU on the formation of a policy to require publicly funded research to be made available at no cost to the readers, but also at no cost to the authors. And that work seems to be moving along the lines of libraries having greater, I don't want to say greater control, but a larger stake in that publication life cycle, the process of publishing and making that content available in perpetuity. And so that movement towards open access, and now towards the infrastructure that supports that open access, I think is just fascinating. And although I'm not directly involved in that work, I do cheer it on. I think that is a benefit to humankind, to have that research just readily available and out there for anyone to build on. I think that's an excellent example of open that libraries pursue.
So, and I guess Peter, since you're here on the screen with me, what do you think we should be thinking about, we as in USG, as we begin? We've got a 2-year migration window in front of us, and so what should we be thinking about as we march down that migration road, and start to move, obviously into the folio reshare space more, and then how we can perhaps along the way and after we migrate sort of better support the open initiatives going forward. There's a lot maybe in that question, so 2 parts perhaps.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little envious, of course, because the USG libraries are at a crossroads. There's a lot of new stuff coming at you, and the temptation is going to be to make the new work like the old. And as someone that has been involved in the early design process for Folio and for Reshare, I've watched how those apps evolved, and I participated in them, and now it's, the project is so big you can't participate in everything, but you watch what people are doing. And what I said earlier about the librarians and library technologists pouring their experience into the design is true, and it continues today. So I guess if I had a recommendation, I think you should take a risk to open yourselves up to new and hopefully more efficient and effective workflows. And coming from this community, I'm pretty confident that those that are already in the Folio and Reshare communities will be welcoming and help you with the process. And then once you got your feet under you, you can see where you can bring your experience and perspective to the ongoing development work. So, I mean, the libraries in the state are really at a privileged position right now. Many of us have been involved in these projects for a long time, and we've lived through the process that got the software to where it is today. And we can't clearly see them from the outside anymore. So as you're implementing these new systems, if there's any room left in your implementation plans and efforts, I encourage you just to note down where you struggle to find answers and understand what you need to know. There are the places where that feedback can help improve the process for the next libraries that come into the project. And even if you don't have time to make the improvements now, and this is going to be a complicated implementation, I expect you won't, just jotting those ideas down in a notebook and coming back to them after your implementation will help the project and help the community as a whole. And we welcome that. I mean, all of us that have invested ourselves in Folio and Reshare want to see this continue and grow. So you'll meet with resistance probably, but I think on the whole, we want to hear where you've run into problems and where things can be improved, and we want to hear your experience and how this software can be made better going forward.
Chris or Emily?
I'll just say, I mean, I think one of the things that we should be thinking about as we're preparing for migration is just connecting with that roadmap for the software and the other partners that are coming online and the features that are going to be added. I think it's important for us to just kind of stay plugged into that space. I feel like there are a lot of as Peter said, it's an exciting time. There are lots of people, lots of big institutions, including the Library of Congress, coming on as a Folio partner, which I think will really help kind of shape that. And us as a very large consortium coming on, I think that you know, all of that will make a difference in the directions of the platform. And I think we have a great opportunity to help shape that, to be in tune with the roadmap, to, as we become users, to help guide that roadmap and to build that roadmap further out. So I think for me, it's really about kind of the ability to come together and share and be. I feel like we'll be a large player in this space, and that feels. I think that feels good. And you know, often I think with other vendors, you may put your hand in the air, which I would really like to request this feature, and you know, it's way down on the list and it never happens. And that I feel like there will be more possibility for those kinds of things to become reality in the Folio space. So I'm excited about kind of the roadmap and our potential to help shape that roadmap in the future.
I'd like to echo a couple things. Peter said earlier, that when you are involved in an open source project, it gives you more sway, it gives you more of a seat at the table. And that's something I would recommend, is that you know, participate in the larger project, not just in the implementation you're doing. You know, that's you know, it can be tempting to just sort of think of your own libraries as, you know, this is what we want, and that's what matters, as opposed to, you know what, I bet we're not, to echo Emily, the special snowflake that we think we are. And there are other libraries and other consortia who are suffering with this exact same problem that we are, and want this to change a certain way. If Folio is going to have conferences and things like that along the lines of what Evergreen and Koha do, that will give you an opportunity to meet those other users and meet those other organizations using it, and you will find so much common ground between those things, because everybody is kind of dealing with the same problems, Snowflake or not. And the other thing I would say is, it's really important, and this is true of any migration anywhere and any software anywhere, but with open source in particular, I mean, this may not be as big a problem now as it was when I started with Evergreen, but there was this kind of, maybe a little bit of magical thinking, maybe kind of a silver bullet thinking about open source kind of solving all of our problems. And, you know, oh, we'll finally be able to, you know, have our fate in our own hands. And that is true long term. You know, I really do believe that it is probably a better model long term than, you know, like you said, the waiting list for proprietary vendor projects. You know, fixing your bug is just not that important to them. But on that note, it's important to keep your end users bought in, because really, if there's usually starts with the catalogers in my experience, but there's, you know, a rebellion starts. And, you know, the reason it starts with catalogers, they're all talking to each other across your colleges, and they're all comparing notes, and they're like, don't you hate this thing? Yeah, I hate this thing. And then all of a sudden it becomes like a problem. And those are real issues. Those are real things that need to be done, but keeping your end users happy is not the word, bought in is the word. Like, this is a mission that we're all on. And in the spirit of librarianship, in the spirit of openness, it is worth being part of this. And that, I think, has gone a long way in the Pines libraries to keep them engaged overall, as they see the project itself as a good in itself, in a way that you would not see, you know, paying for a piece of software as in the same way. And the other thing is getting involved as much as you can, and encouraging your end users to be involved with things like documentation and testing. And, you know, if you have in-house developers and can contribute patches upstream, that is probably the biggest thing you can do, is really participate in the project. That means it's not just this is yours and this is us. It's like, this is our project. We're all doing this. So that's my general advice, and I'll stop now.
Thank you, Chris. All right. I think we're at the point where we'd like to give folks some time to put some questions in chat. I do know that we had a question a little ways back from Lucy. All right. So Lucy was asking, and I think this goes back to something that you mentioned, Chris. How can or should libraries protect themselves from an open solution being bought or co-opted by a commercial vendor, much like your Open Office Libre example? So everybody feel free to chime in on that one.
Yeah, I'll since you mentioned my name, I'll start. It's actually happened in library software. Koha, this is probably like, 13 years ago or so. There was a vendor who was participating in development of Koha, and then kind of took the project, kind of hijacked the project a little bit, and took it in their own direction and kind of closed some things up. Now, when I say open and closed in this sense, the software, if it's licensed correctly, it has to be shared. Like, it's not, you can't then later, there's some licensing schemes that allow you to do this, but especially if you're doing general public, the GNU general public license, I don't want to get too deep into licenses, but there are types of licenses that are called copyleft, or they require that any code you create must also be shared under the same license. And that was true with Koha. And when that happened, the community users of Koha who were not interested in continuing the way this vendor was going, they forked the project. And so forking does come into play there. And with enough of the developer base, they were able to continue the project. And honestly, I've not heard, I never did go back and check to see if that company even still exists. I don't think it does, but like, I think that the community, the Koha community is like strong and thriving, and it ends up being kind of irrelevant what that vendor did. So, you know, as long as you have the sort of strength of the developer base behind you, then it kind of doesn't matter what a vendor tries to do, as long as the licensing is done correctly. That's my take on that.
I think licensing does play a part in that. The Folio project made a deliberate choice to pick the Apache 2 license because they wanted to encourage service providers to have an equal stake with libraries in supporting the community. You know, recognizing that it takes strong support from not only service providers that are providing hosting support or migration support or custom software development or any one of a number of ways that the project can be supported. You know, that is equal to libraries and librarians that are giving their subject matter expertise and going through the user experience design process and putting that effort in. So the licensing does play a key part in that. Yeah, I agree with what Chris was saying.
All right, thanks, y'all. I'm trying to work backwards to see if there's any additional, excuse me, questions. Let me see. So we had a question here from Olga about sort of specifically, at least, what are our USG plans to support and develop local initiatives and local experts as we move through this migration process. And I'll speak to a little bit of that those plans are in development, since we're in early days of thinking about, we're in sort of this pre-implementation phase, but we will have obviously training, and once we get across that go live line, I think we'll then begin to start thinking about, you know, keep our eye on what we can develop beyond a minimal viable product that gets us, you know, going on day one. But you know, Lucy brought up a good question. What as we begin to think about these next 2 years and the migration process, but then also what we can do to sort of develop these local initiatives and experts, what do you all think we should do? What do you have any ideas, thoughts, things that have worked in the past, or ideas about that?
I'll just start. I mean, I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Peter. I was just going to say, being involved in the community is always a place to start, or getting connected to other people who have gone before us. In particular, with this platform, I feel like that is important. I believe there is another consortium, maybe that's in Missouri. I might be making that up, but am I right? Okay, good.
Yep, that's
Um,
correct.
all right, good. That has kind of already moved in the folio direction. So kind of, I think learning from the community, engaging with some of our peers, and how how they're getting connected. I mean, I think it's hard until it's more of a challenge until we're actually live and using the platform day to day. I feel like once we are using the platform day to day, then we'll have natural avenues for connection and more to kind of talk about. But I think as we're thinking about preparing for go live, I guess I've always found that those connections to other communities, like what they did to prepare, asking questions, like connecting, like what are some of the pain points. So if you can learn from other people's pain points, I am always about that. Like don't have them yourself if you can learn from other folks. So I think one of the things I would just advise is if we can connect with our peers and community folks who have gone before us, and in particular other consortium, and learn from them.
2 thumbs up, Emily.
Also thumbs up from me. I would really underline the point about connecting with others who've gone before. We at GPLS have, we've been through kind of anything y'all could ever experience as far as like software migrations, things like that. The workflows of public libraries and academic libraries do differ, but the experience of migrations and the sort of gotchas and the things that you're going to hit are probably universal. So we say it all the time within our group at GPLS, the Pines group. Why aren't more people talking to us? Like I've been to several, presentations at different conferences and stuff about we went through this migration and here's, the pain we had and the lessons learned. And I'm always thinking, gosh, if they had just talked to Elaine Hardy, if they had just talked to, somebody at GPLS about what we did, they could have solved that. They wouldn't have had to go through that. So I'll stop there. That's a great point.
Yep, we're certainly not an island. We're not alone in this. And I do think from a USG perspective, and Chris, here in the state, we've had a long history of collaboration. And I think this is an opportunity to strengthen that collaboration, as we always do, and to rely on each other, but then also look outside of us, and look for examples. And it is Mobius that is moving to folio reshare, I believe, by May of 2024. So if that goes as planned, we'll have an example there to look toward, and resources to ask in people and experiences. So thank y'all. So we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. Does anybody else have any thoughts, questions? I noticed Wilhelmina made a comment about centralized permissions and roles and things like that coming from Gil, and we certainly, I think Orbis Cascade said this. I think Barry picked up on it in our previous migration. I'm going to get it wrong now that I'm trying to think about it. They had a saying of do things once, do it right. Do it right, do it once. I can't remember exactly how it was, but that's sort of what we adhere to, I think, still trying to do things once centrally and do it right. Hopefully the one time we do it here centrally and get it out to the local institutions. Yeah, and statistical reporting is something to consider too. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was I think the Folio Product Council last week that had a presentation from the consortia SIG, some of the work that was coming out of Mobius implementation on the ability for a central office to propose configuration changes or make configuration changes in tenants that for things that are in common to ease that process. So there's already some work happening there coming from the Mobius community, and looking forward to the Galileo libraries adding their voices to that work.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, since you're unmuted, Lucy was asking if you would like to talk a bit in our brief bit of time about reshare and the larger goals that are there beyond just our folio implementation.
Sure. So reshare is a peer community to folio. It uses the same underlying technologies as folio, but the reshare project has its own governance group, its own roadmap for development, and its own processes, its own funding structure. But the goal in aligning itself with the folio community is to have the same look and feel and to use the same underlying components, to not have to redo those and not have to have another set of instructions on how to work a different platform. So that they're designed to look similar and work together, although in the case of reshare, it will connect to any integrated library system. That, of course, is less of a concern for this community because you'll all be on folio, but reshare being bigger than folio in terms of what it hopes to, what it aims to connect to, and how it wants to build a resourcing network. So I think it's important to know that although reshare will look like folio, it is its own community with its own roadmap, its own governance structure, its own development timeline, its own groups that are of subject matter experts that are looking at the problems and commonalities that libraries are having with resource sharing, and working on those to bring those to fruition. So you'll be participating in both folio and reshare. They are both communities aligned with the Open Library Foundation, and so they use some of the same resources, Zoom meetings and things like that. But they are different communities that are doing their thing.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. All right, I think unless somebody else has another question, we are pretty much at time, unless Emily, Chris, Peter, any brief closing thought that came to you at the end there?
Nothing other than thank you for the invitation to help kick off your meeting. And for me personally, joining the folio and reshare communities, looking forward to seeing the new ideas and the new burst of energy coming from Georgia.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation as well, and I'm excited for y'all. I think this is a really cool project, and just know that GPLS is here to help with anything you need. We're all rooting for you. So good luck. I'm excited to see what happens.
Thanks, everybody. I hope it's a great meeting, and thanks for including me.
All right, Emily, Peter, Chris, thank you very much. This was very much appreciated and very useful. Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. You too.